Okay, so we're ready for the next step in our All About Me collage. At this point, you should have completed a watercolor background using a technique from the ones practiced in your visual journal, and a drawing inspired by a Bitmoji of yourself or a cartoon version of some sort. Okay, we're going to set this aside for now. And we're going to take a look at what we're doing today. So I've gathered some materials today. I have with me some magazines, a newspaper, and some old warm-ups. Some other things that you could include in this. You could use wrappers from food products, as long as they're clean. You could use words from boxes or images on boxes. You could find old birthday cards. You can use old photos, books that maybe are no longer wanted. So anything that essentially could be cut and glued is what you are going to gather for this project. If you decide to use photos or an old book, please get permission from a parent first to make sure it's okay for you to cut things out of those items, okay? If printer at home, you could also print images. I don't, so I'm going to use what I have on hand. You will also need some scissors for this, and I would plan to spend about 30 to 45 minutes looking through these magazines, newspapers, and these items that you might want to incorporate into your collage. Okay, so I'm going to move these aside for now, and I'm going to show you some images and some objects that I have already gone through and torn out prior to this. Okay? So I gathered quite a variety of magazine images, and we're going to talk about how I might plan to use some of these and some of the different techniques I might want to use. Okay? So most of mine came from magazines. I may also actually use some of the old warm-ups because there are some that definitely are relevant to me. And I have some things from a newspaper as well. So right now, what you're going to be looking for are 3 words that describe you as a person, and 3 pictures. So 3 or more words and 3 or more pictures from a magazine, newspaper, photograph, anything that can be cut and glued to add to your All About Me collage. So I've got a variety of things here that I plan to use in different ways. So let's start with this. I am a friend. I pulled this out. I plan to use the word friend. So there are a lot of different ways I can cut this out. You can be creative. So a lot of times students see the words and they instantly think, well, I should cut this out just straight across. That's where a lot of our brains just go to. So I'm going to just randomly pick an example and show you what it looks like when you do something just straight across versus when you get a little bit more creative with it. Okay, so I've just torn this out. This doesn't actually have anything to do with me. So let's say I'm going to use the word welcome. This is what most students initially do, is they go in and they just cut it out like this. And that's okay, but you don't want to do that for everything. It gets a little bit boring if they're all cut out like that. So what I'm actually going to do is set this aside. And again, it's okay. It's not terrible. But let's talk about some other ways you can do this. So one way you could do this is you could do a circle around it, or even a half circle. So let's see, I'm going to take a compass and I am just going to draw a circle around this word. If you don't have a compass at home, remember you can use anything that's round to do this. It does not have to be a compass. You can use a coffee cup or a can, anything that's round that you can trace, okay? It's actually probably easier to just find something that you can trace rather than using a compass, but I have a compass, so I'm going to use it. Okay, so once I've traced that, I can go back in with my scissors And I am going to cut this out in the shape of a circle. So I'm going to point this out here for a second. I think this is a good time to show this to you. So I'm just going to put this on top of a piece of white paper so you can see a little bit easier. So you see how a little bit, this edge is a little bit sloppy. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my scissors and really take my time to clean that edge up. Okay, and this is flat at the top. That's because the circle went off the page. That's totally fine because I may end up turning this and putting it up against an edge on my paper. I could even cut off the half top part so it's straight across and I just see the curve on the bottom. So get creative with the shape of your words. Okay, so I'm going to set this one aside. So that's an example. You can put a word in a circle. I also want to point out that this is a nice big word. So if we look at some of these other words down here, they're so small. It doesn't mean you can't use small words, but I do think that the bigger your words are, the happier you're going to be in the end with using them on your collage. Okay, so let's look at a couple more ways to do this. So I've got my circle with my word friend, which would mean I need at least 2 more words to describe who I am. Okay, so clearly I'm an art teacher, so school is pretty important to me, so I'm going to cut out the word school. You can, again, get creative with how you do this. I might even use a pencil to lightly sketch on top of my picture how I want to cut this out. So again, you know, doing cutting a word out just as a rectangle is fine, but try and think about some other ways you might be able to cut your words out. So when I go to cut this out, I am going to just cut around it initially in the shape of a rectangle. And then I am going to work carefully to cut around this. So notice how I'm turning my paper as I'm using my scissors. Okay, so cutting that full piece out probably took me about a minute or so, maybe a minute and a half. It probably looks faster in the video to you. Okay, so I've got a couple of words cut out. I need at least one more. So I'm going to look for one more of my pages where maybe I saw a word that I want to use. So you'll notice that having this variety of size words and different shapes is going to make my collage more interesting in the end. So looking for one more word. Okay. So here we have the word art. So I'm going to use this. And maybe this time I'm going to do something a little bit more angular. And I'm just going to kind of freehand cut this out. And I'm actually going to follow this line. So hopefully what you notice about these is that they are in different shapes, and they're not all round or curved. Some are angular, but they're all cut out neatly and carefully. So unless you're going for a style where you're specifically ripping out a word, which could be done, you want to be careful about it. So let's say I wanted to use a tearing technique for a word. Let's do it down here. It actually is a little bit harder, in my opinion, to do this because you've got to be more careful. So let's say I want to do the word free. Okay, so that is a way you can do it. You can do it just, you know, freestyle so that you're tearing them out, I'm going to put this on a black paper so you can see these two better. Okay, so we're seeing how the different shapes and techniques give us more variety in our work, okay? And then of course you can use just the words that are cut out in a rectangular shape. To some extent, that's fine. I just wouldn't do everything that way. All right, so I've got 3 words. Remember, you need at least 3 or more. Probably the more you have, the better your artwork's going to look. And so now what I'm going to do is I am going to start looking for pictures that tell something about who I am. So I found this picture, and I live in a city, and this is a picture of a city, so I'm going to use part of this. I'm not going to use the entire picture. I'm just going to use part of it. So I'm going to decide which parts I want to use, and then I'm going to cut them just based on that. So I think I'm going to focus on this part. This water down here in the boat kind of remind me of the harbor. So I am following the natural lines in the image that was found in the magazine. So I don't have to include the entire picture. Sometimes we're just going to use part of it, and that's fine. Just decide what part it is you want to use. So again, I'm taking my time, turning my scissors and my paper when I cut. And again, I'm not going to use this whole image. That would take up a large part of my collage. And I want to see a little bit of my background. So I've now got the part of my picture that I'm going to use in my collage cut out. Okay, so you see how that's, because I've followed the lines, it actually is a little bit more interesting than if I just cut out a big square. So a lot of times what students do is they'll do this. So I'll show you an example of what I often see, and we'll look at the difference. So I often see students just do this, okay? So let's compare the way these look. So here's just a rectangle cut out, kind of boring. Here's one where we've taken our time and thought about what part of the image we want to use, and we've been more thoughtful in how we've cut it out, okay? So you really do want to be thoughtful about that. So the point of this is that when you're cutting your pictures and your words out, you need to get creative with how you're doing this, okay? Don't just opt for the plain rectangle. Certainly you can use the rectangle shapes from here, sometimes here and there, but if all of your images on your paper are just rectangles, it gets pretty boring. Okay, so once you've cut out your 3 or more images that you plan to use, and this only counts as 1, so this would only count as 1 in my collage. Once you've cut out your 3 pictures and your 3 or more words, so 3 or more pictures, 3 or more words, you are going to put these in a safe spot and you're going to hold on to them until you're ready for the next step. So I recommend putting them in a Ziploc bag or a folder or an envelope, somewhere that they're going to be safe and they're not going to get lost. Okay? All right.